Well, let's go back to Matt in London, who has, I think, the Amish-Welsh clash for real.
I have indeed. Let's hope so. Now, the authors Martin Amis and Irvine Welsh are famous for chronicling the darker underside of modern Britain. Martin Amis in London Fields, Lionel Asbo in Money, homing in on the unsavoury excesses of the 80s and 90s in the English capital. Welsh chronicling the equally unsavoury low lives and druggies of Edinburgh during the same period, most famously in Trainspotting, book and film. But both have expressed an enduring love for their home countries. While Irvine Welsh is furiously tweeting in favour of Scottish independence, Martin Amis says being English is a source of quiet pride. They have something in common. They both now live on the other side of the ocean in the USA. Irvine Welsh in Chicago, Martin Amis in New York. Are they taking cover as the English love bombs rain in on Scotland? And does Martin Amis translate his love of England into a love for a United Kingdom in its current form? Well, let's find out. Welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Martin Amis in New York. Imagine waking up on Friday morning and Scotland is now an independent country. Martin Amis, how will you feel?
I would feel bereft, I think. This is just what I've been used to all my life, and I feel there is a sort of identity, there's certainly a literary identity with Ireland and Scotland. And I think it's a leap in the dark. Salman is right when he says it's unprecedented. It's Eric Hobsbawm, writing in the year 2000, said it had never happened, that pressure from below had brought about a secession. You know, when Czechoslovakia broke up, it was called a velvet divorce, but public opinion was never more than 30-odd% in favor of it. This is very unusual. This is unprecedented.
You have wrote a lot about Englishness, but how important has the Scottish mix in Britain been to your own sense of identity?
Well, I've just taken it for granted. It's always been there, and when I go to Scotland, I feel this is part of the United Kingdom, and it is. It's the UK. What would be left of it if Scotland got out is a very diminished country, entity.
Are you surprised by, I mean, you know, the debate in the last few weeks has been incredibly passionate. You've heard the Prime Minister today almost tearful as he was pleading with Scots against the notion of divorce. Does it surprise you, watching all this unfold from the other side of the pond, that it's taken so long for people in London, especially the politicians, to realise what is at stake here?
Yes, well, it's been on the table more or less for decades, and we always assumed there would be a comforting large no vote, and it's changed, and now there's a kind of clearly a national fever in Scotland, and it's the people. It's not being imposed from above. It's spontaneous, and why has it suddenly become so intolerable to be part of this union?
Okay, well, let's put that to Irvine Welsh, who's all the way over in Chicago. It's very odd talking to both of you on the other side of the Atlantic, but there we go. Irvine Welsh, you heard Martin Amis there. Why is it suddenly so intolerable for Scots to be part of Britain when it's been the case for so long? What's so intolerable for you to be part of this union?
I don't think it's ever been intolerable for Scots to be part of Britain. I think what has become intolerable is to be part of an old elitist imperialist state, a very centralised state called the United Kingdom, which to me is a very, very different animal from Britain. And I think that's really what people are voting against. They're voting for democracy, and they're voting for a chance to improve their own lives. I don't really see it as being, I mean, it's not like the way that the media have framed this, it's as if, you know, that Scotland's going to sort of kind of saw itself off with the Cheviots and go off to Iceland. It's not. All that's happening is a change of government. Basically, people are running their own affairs. That's got to be a good thing. It's got to be a good thing for Scotland, and I think the knock-on effects for England are immense as well. And I think, you know, that it's an exciting change, as Martin has said there. It's from the people. It's democracy at a grassroots level. It's not from the top down. It's not from the tired political classes and the elites. And it's not about some kind of shabby heritage thing about all sticking together because we always have.
Right.
It's about trying to work out a modern set of arrangement that's to benefit people in this country.
But would you be saying what you're saying now if there was, let's say, you know, a Labour government in power in London? Or, I mean, to what extent is what you're saying also a reaction against what some people call the Southern Toffs?
It's nothing to do with that. I mean, you have to accept, on one level, you have to accept that the economies in the southeast of England and the economies in Scotland are very different. And a unitary state, as Britain is always going to suit the seat of government, and that's where all the finance, that's where all the investment is going to go. So that's very unsuitable from a Scottish point of view. But the whole thing is about that extension of democracy. It's about realising that a system is flawed and failed and broken and no longer works. Let's replace it with something modern. Let's not get hung up about the past. Yes, we've all got a common identity, a common heritage. We've all got, the people in Scotland and England and Wales and Ireland have done great things together. They'll continue to do great things together.
Okay.
All they're doing is getting a bit of self-government and a bit of self-control.
Well, let me put that to Martin Amis. The union no longer works. It's not democratic enough. We need fundamental constitutional reform. What's your take on that?
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for embracing self-respect, and that's what Scotland looks like it's going to do. What seems to be pushing it, I suspect, is the NHS versus Trident. For the Scots, always been more left-wing than the Brits. Than the English. They're hard men. It's law and economics there, and they look at those figures, and there is no justification for Trident. It's just it's for face. It's for reasons of prestige that we have Trident. There is no earthly use for it, and I think that's stuck in the craw of the Scots, and understandably.
So you just said the Scots famous for being hard men, law and economics, but for many of them this is a very emotional vote, isn't it? As it is for us as well, down here.
Yes, I do. It was once explained to me that the Celtic character, the male Celt, is either a hard man or a desperate chancer. And I think the desperate chancers are showing very strong at the moment, but the question is, will the hard men decide on a risk-averse strategy and vote no? And there is this weight of history in that it hasn't happened before. And I think that's the sort of thing that subconsciously will impede the yes vote.
Irvine Welsh, you're a hard man, according to Martin Amis, a hard man who's oblivious to the love bombs being dropped by the Prime Minister, who was almost in tears today as he pled with you not to divorce.
We're all hard men and hopeless romantics and all that kind of crap, but that doesn't really square with the reality about people kind of having aspirations towards a democracy. And you have to ask yourself, why did we get to this point? How have we got to this point? It didn't happen overnight, and it's the kind of the mistakes that have been made by the No campaign, which have been criticised for, are pretty much inevitable. They're about a secular decline of the United Kingdom as a concept. They're about the building blocks of United Kingdom, industry and empire, the esprit de corps from 2 world wars, no longer now being part of history, but also the things, the things that Martin talked about, the more modern post-war building blocks, the NHS, the welfare state, being systematically destroyed by both the Labour and Conservative parties over the last few years. They can't campaign on that. You're not going to make it. You're not going to make any headway by campaigning on bailing out bankers or kind of funding privatisation schemes with oil money. So there is nothing substantive for the union to hang its hat on now. We have to accept that times have changed and move on and create a modern democracy, not just for Scotland, but for the rest of the islands too.
Right. Perhaps you're not a hard man, but a hard pragmatist. You're both masters of words. Let me ask Martin first. As a master of words, Martin, what would your sales pitch, relatively briefly, be to the Scottish yes voters, or indeed the waverers, to stay in the union? What would you say to them?
Well, if I'd been managing the campaign, I would have not let it the unionist position be called no. It's very hard to make it sound positive when no is what you're shouting all the time. But I would I would appeal to loyalty, and I think it's not a meaningless concept, as Northern Ireland shows us. And why isn't it stronger? When the Scots first got their vote after 300 years, this was at the end of the last century, the turnout was 60%, not very impressive. They say it's going to be 85% for the referendum. Now, where did that passion come from, and so recently?
Okay.
Why has it manifested itself here?
Okay. Martin, I'm going to have to leave it there. But Irvine Welsh, a final word to you. You are a master of the pithy tweet, some of them that I can't reproduce on this programme because the language is rather vernacular. But if you had to have one final tweet to heal the divisions after the vote, what would you say, very briefly?
I would just say that, I've never been so proud. Whatever happens, whether it's a yes or no vote, I've never been so proud of where I come from, because what we've done in Scotland is we've made people in the Western world who've accepted this kind of sort of neoliberal kind of model of globalisation. We've made them care about democracy again, with 97% of people registered. Everybody, yes and no, can be proud of that.
Thank you very much, Irvine Welsh. That was a bit too long for a tweet, but fascinating nonetheless. Martin Amis, Irvine Welsh, Chicago, New York, thank you very much indeed. We are back tomorrow at 7.